who has a very exciting job title at KCC. Something like Transport Innovations Programme Manager. And Tim, I apologise if I've got that wrong. And he's going to take you through a programme the County Council is involved in running that's, let's hope, is of interest. So Tim, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, no, that's right. That is my title for now. Anyway, we shall see. I will just try and share my screen. Bear with me. Okay. Hopefully that's come up on the screens for everybody. Keith. Oh, lovely. Wonderful. Hi, everyone. Yes, thank you very much for coming. I am Tim Middleton. I'm the Transport Innovations Programme Manager at Kent County Council. For reference, that is the best email to get us on regarding this project, but the details will be there at the end, or obviously sent out as part of this presentation. The project really, which I don't know how much information generally people have, so I'll go from the top as if we're starting from scratch. Essentially, Kent County Council has a whole range of projects to install electric vehicle chargers across the county. This ranges from ultra rapid charging stations, so a bit more like your BP or Fastned, or one of the big companies, charging. So that is for motorways, or for the strategic road network, as we'd call it. So if you're on a long journey and you want to top up quickly and don't want to hang around too long, that's what it's for. We've just about to award a district charger network tender. So we've looked at partnering with the districts and Medway. And so we've got 6 districts in Kent and Medway, so 7 partners, and 157 district-owned car parks around the county, which is brilliant. So we've just about to award for that. So putting in multiple chargers in each one of those. And we also have some other projects looking at rapid taxi chargers and what have you. So largely this project fits into what you would call I think technically it's called fast charging, but these days possibly is the slower or grazing type charging. It's very common, really. 7 kilowatt chargers, for those who aren't aware, you're basically your standard charger. It's the type of speed you would expect on your home if you're lucky enough to have a driveway and can charge a vehicle there. It sort of suits overnight charging or slightly longer duration, or just top up really as you go along at your destination, as they call it. There's all these terms, all these fancy terms these days, but what you would call destination charging, which really is where this project fits into as well. And the project came about because we were getting quite a lot of questions and queries from parishes and village halls saying, we want to do something. Have you got anything we can get involved in? And we thought, well, okay, let's see if we got some. We had some grant money at the time. Let's see if we can just give out a grant. And this is probably the beginning of the pandemic, so back in the dark days. And we learned pretty quickly that actually that wasn't really going to be the best solution for many parishes and village halls, because actually having one consistent network managed by one partner, essentially having a consistent end user experience, etc., was really going to provide lots of benefits, and really allowing that procurement to happen once rather than potentially hundreds of times. And there are some better suppliers out there, and maybe some less favourable ones. But essentially, we're exactly as you would imagine. The project was to install electric vehicle chargers in smaller communities, mainly 7 kilowatt chargers. We have done a few, or we are doing a few that are slightly faster, but on the whole, most of them will be 7 kilowatt. We are offering, as part of the project, a 30% profit share back, which I'll explain later. Possibly isn't going to be a huge money-making exercise for anybody. Let's sort of be realistic about that one. However, we sort of felt it was quite important that if local communities are essentially giving up a couple of parking spaces, that actually, well, why shouldn't that local community get some of that money if it can generate some money? So we thought that was a nice thing to do. And for information, the other 70% we've ring-fenced and signed signed an agreement to say we will ring fence it for the project to basically maintain and expand the network, for which KCC is responsible for. And ultimately, the way it works in principle is KCC will install and own the chargers. However, it is, of course, on land that we don't own, but we will manage it as a whole network. I've touched on some of this already. Ultimately, the reason we're doing the project is because the private sector really, in majority of cases, won't go here. The financials, as I'll explain a bit further along, don't necessarily stack up for the private sector. Slower charging, although it is by far the majority of charging that drivers do, certainly at the moment. In smaller communities, particularly rural communities, the business case possibly isn't quite there, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be providing chargers. So obviously, local authority, that's what we're trying to fill that gap for. One tender process, we've been through that, so we know we've got a competitive tender from good quality, from a really good quality supplier. They're called Connected Curb. You're very welcome to Google them. You may have seen in the news, they're just expanding into America, and they're one of the fastest growing ones, and there's lots of excitement around them. But so far, so good. Quality seems to be very high, so we're pleased. We procured through our Kent Commercial Services framework, so anyone on that framework has already been vetted for quality, and we held that process earlier in the year. The advantage for the end user is if they go from one parish or village hall to the next, they'll have that consistent user experience. They can use the same app, they'll see the same lining, the signing, the price will be the same, and there's advantages there. And there are Connected Curve have actually been procured by Dover District Council for their charging experience. So actually, as they become a little bit more prominent, end users should be pretty familiar with the kit. And ultimately, it's only me to say, ultimately, the big reason we're doing all this is we all have green agendas, which are very important, and electric vehicles are seen as one way of achieving those goals. Where are we installing? Well, originally, I'd say we thought, and possibly this is my naivety of how it all works, but we thought, right, parish councils, that makes sense. We'll just aim at parishes. Very quickly, we learned that actually lots of the village halls, as we've culminated here today, we've realised they've been spun off into village hall associations or charities or other sort of models. And so we thought, well, there's no problem with that from our point of view, as long as the any profit generated, basically our rule is, as long as it goes to the good of the community and not into the back pocket of a landowner who takes that profit, then when we've got no problem with that. We are open to suggestions, and we have had all sorts of suggestions. We are actually putting some at a rugby club in Walmer. We're open to, I'm open to all sorts. There could be religious settings. There could be sports clubs. I don't know, you name it. Let's see. Let's investigate. I mean, I've done quite a few Google Street View tours with a few parishes, and actually, you have to get a little bit creative in some of these communities to find spaces. But as long as it's safe and the land is owned, well, it doesn't necessarily. Well, I'm going to caveat it here. Ultimately, we need to know who owns the land, but really it's where the profit goes. As long as the profit is ring-fenced for community good, then let's have a chat. Let's see. So get your thinking caps on. We're open to all sorts of suggestions. Now, don't get too worried about this. I appreciate this is just hundreds of words on a page now, but generally the process goes like this. Some of them are easier than others as we are learning. But ultimately, we have an online portal, which you'll see at the bottom. Don't worry too much about copying that. That was the shortest I could get the URL to be semi-memorable, but we'll send the link out after this. There is a frequently asked questions section, which is a lot more detailed than this presentation, which hopefully should answer lots of the questions. But on that online portal, you can register. A little bit confusing because you have to register before you apply, I'm afraid. Apologies for that. There's no way around it for us, unfortunately, but you register on that portal. That sort of brings you up so we know that you are semi-interested in the scheme. Then you've got the option as part of your application to carry out a resident survey or gather some more information on your sort of users who are likely to use it. We do this because we ultimately for some locations, more parish, more sort of focus on parish than it is village halls. But on some locations, we are able to apply for funding, which helps pay for some of the works. And that is usually the information we need to help with that. However, it also helps us score so that we know that if there's clearly a demand in a particular location, well, why not focus there first? So we tend to give a score for that. So there's time to do that. And if you're confused or you need more information, or you think, oh, this is onerous, just email us. We'll help you through. We're not asking for loads of information. Actually, we're trying to make this easy. Then you can actually physically apply. All the information's on the website. I can't go through it all today, but we're hoping it's a fairly streamlined process. Again, if there's anything you don't understand or can't provide the information for, that's okay. But we will score that. We have the scoring criteria on the website, you'll see, and it just really helps us prioritize where the money can go. If you're successful, if you're not really, it's very rare that we're saying no. We're just saying not maybe right now. We need to come back. And it has actually been the case that some of the early applicants who are on the reserve list, we're now actually getting to them. So it's not a no. Which ultimately, my goal is to get charges everywhere. We need them. So the more charges, the better. We've just got to manage that in a sensible way to make sure the money goes further. But ultimately, if you are successful initially, we will get Connected Curb, the supplier. It will actually be their subcontractor who are called Volca, but ultimately Connected Curb will come and do a survey, and they will basically bring a price back to us to see, tell us what's viable. Is there enough power? Could you tap into the power of the building? Would you have to bring in a new power from the power supply from the grid? Where could the bays go? And give us a few options in price. We'll then discuss it with you and finalise the details. And then we would sign a legal agreement, which we do have a base template of. Some are very happy with this, some like a little bit of a tweak. Some nuanced sites require a little bit of a tweak from both ends. Really depends on who owns the land, where the site is, etc., etc. Then I'd love to say installation is carried out very simply. It's never a simple process. They seem like they should be a very simple thing to do, but in reality, especially if we need new power off the grid, we're reliant somewhat on UKPN to do that. So UKPN, we have to raise an order to them. They then give us a 4 or 6 week process before they come on site. Once they're on site, not until they've actually installed that, brought that power to the edge of the site, can we then get a meter installed. So I don't want to sound too negative about it, but I think it's important to be somewhat realistic. These things aren't quick. So realistically, the end-to-end process could take 6 months, could be more, can be a lot less actually, in fairness. And I'd like to say Nicola on the call from Ditton has probably experienced a quicker process, but there was no power needed from the grid. So that made life a little bit easier. Those situations, which are quite rare in honesty, are quicker for us because we can just get the supplier in, they go and do their civils. As soon as the legal agreement's sorted, we can start that works. And then ultimately we'd like to jointly promote. Ideally, we would really like some localized promotion. Our team is quite small, so if anything you can do in newsletters or websites or whatever would be great. The charges will go on ZapMap and the National Charge Point Registry, so the drivers should find them anyway, but hopefully then people start using the chargers. That is ultimately the process, but I won't dwell too much on that. Some of the highlights in terms of payment, because I know this is, the logistics of how things actually work in reality are quite important. At the moment, users will be charged 25p per kilowatt. We would want a consistent price for all customers across the whole network. We will imagine that this will probably rise by probably a penny a year, you would have thought, something like that, but it really depends what the market is. If we're pricing it too high, then no one will use them. If we're pricing it too low and there's not enough money to recoup the electricity costs and other bits, then we've got a problem there. But for information, obviously that price is 7 kilowatt, well, 25p per kilowatt, you can do the maths there. We do have to pay VAT on this as well. And so the end user will pay their 25p per kilowatt. And obviously they're paying for the electricity, the maintenance of the charger, and potentially any profit in there. To make life it's a little, I've got some scenarios in a second, which hopefully will explain it a little bit more clearly, but we'll take the maintenance and back office costs off that. KCC is holding the risk here, so that if the charges frankly are never used, we still have to pay to have them maintained, insured, serviced every year, and we will pay that. So you as a landowner won't lose anything. However, in reality, you are giving up those bays for something that won't be used. It's obviously not the situation any of us want, but I think in these early years, it may be a chicken and egg scenario to some extent. Some sites will probably be well used and some sites possibly less so. But it's a eyes wide open situation there. And any remaining profit will be split 70-30, but as I say, ours is ring fenced. It's certainly not paying for any Christmas parties, and I don't expect there to be masses of money in these early years, to be honest. And there's two scenarios of how we repay you, because I understand that obviously if you're paying out the electricity, if it's connected to your building and your electricity bills are going up each month, it's quite important to keep that cash flow coming back to you. We will pay you back that on a monthly basis. You don't need to invoice us. We can pay you directly without invoicing. We will issue you with a statement every month to tell you exactly how many kilowatts have been used, and then you would correlate that to your bill. With the only caveat there is we're basically setting a limit. If you haven't got if we haven't incurred a debt, or ultimately you've paid out more than £50, we won't in a month we won't repay you, simply because of the administration burden. So as soon as we hit that £50 mark, we will pay you. That should be the most that you'd ever be out of pocket. But ultimately, if you've got £1.50's worth of costs, it's possibly not worth the administration burden on either side to repay you. On the other scenario, which frankly seems to be about 80% of the scenarios, a new power connection comes in. Well, KCC will pay the electricity, so we'll sort all that. We'll pay the standing charge. So we would just pay you your profit on a quarterly basis if there is any. But I can explain in more detail as we go along if needed. I've just done a couple of scenarios, which I think is probably brings a bit of reality to it in terms of the financials. No one knows how much these are going to be used. In fact, we've done quite a few tenders now, and charge point providers will give you a series of scenarios much like this, because frankly, you're obviously just trying to predict the future. But if we were to look at a 10% utilization of the charge point, so you take your 24 hours a day that could possibly be used, and in many instances, people will charge overnight and leave their vehicle. But each charge point obviously has a maximum amount of revenue it could generate in a year. But a 10% utilisation would generate about £1,500. We would have to pay the £300 in VAT off that. You as if it was connected to the building, then you as a landowner would have paid about £1,020 over a year if you were charging 17p per kilowatt. So we would repay you. You always get your money first. You won't be held to ransom on that basis. And then the annual maintenance and servicing costs and insurance really comes to a little bit more, but we're rounding it down to £360 per charge point. So in this scenario, so that has to be paid too, obviously. In this scenario, Kent County Council will lose, or the project will lose £180 per year if they were only used 10%. You as a landowner would not lose anything, but of course you would not get a share of the profit either. If it goes up to 20% utilisation, the maths obviously gets a little bit better. £3,000 generated in a year, obviously VAT at £600. Your electricity bills would have gone up by £2,040, repaid monthly. And of course, the maintenance and servicing is still the same, so you take that off. If we do that basis, it's a complete break-even scenario. So nobody generates a profit, but nobody loses money either, or Kent County Council doesn't lose money either. I should probably say, because I'm saying Kent County Council, we're all taxpayers here, so we're thinking, hang on, we don't want KCC to lose money. We have ring-fenced this project. So this project is funded from basically grants here, there, and everywhere that I've managed to apply for. So Kent County Council itself, for clarity, is essentially funding my costs and my team's costs, which we'd have paid for anyway, of course. The project, if I say Kent County Council loses money, Kent County Council actually doesn't lose money, but the project loses money because those grants have come in externally. So just to put minds at ease there. And then we get into a slightly better scenario. So perhaps maybe a couple of years down the line when lots more of us are driving EVs, if you were down to 30% plus utilisation, you would generate more like 4,500. You'd still have to pay your £900 VAT. Obviously, the cost of electricity are up more. I should note again, if these were taken from the grid, then you wouldn't, as a landowner, you wouldn't have that £3,060 cost. That would be paid for by KCC, so that's dealt with. And that would generate a profit of £180 a year. So Kent County Council would retain 126 to manage the network and expand the network, and the landowner would get £54 back. If utilisation goes much beyond that, of course, the figures get a little bit better. So I think it's fair to say, which is the key lesson, this isn't a money-making exercise. I think this is really, it has to be seen as a climate change exercise and meeting people's needs locally with electric vehicle chargers, but I just think that's reality. We've been pretty upfront with the costs. Obviously, the capital costs themselves are quite substantial, especially frankly, in lots of these locations, in rural locations, the grid isn't particularly well catered for in some of these locations, and the cost of bringing in power is quite high. The advantages of us doing this, though, is that in years to come, you've got a pretty good power supply brought into the site that you could make use of if you wanted to install more EV chargers, or if heat pumps need to come off it, or what have you. So if nothing else, this project is sort of future-proofing lots more sites that, you know, who knows what's going to happen with the world of EV in 15 years' time, but we do know electricity use is probably going to go up with heat pumps and the like. So there's some good bits to it there. Kent County Council has taken the financial risk, or as I say, the project is taking the financial risk, but you do, of course, have to allocate electric vehicle charging bays. And we don't expect you to enforce this because they haven't got any enforcement powers. However, we can put overstay charges or do some other messaging to try and discourage people from parking and leaving their vehicle, especially if they're not an electric vehicle. But ultimately, we would like those allocated and some soft enforcement, ideally, if possible. But if it can't happen, that's fine. We tend to sign a 5-year legal agreement. We figure this is fair enough in terms of making sure that obviously the capital investment that's being put up, and for information, this usually averages about £12,000 for 2 chargers. So it's quite a lot of money, more than probably anyone would think is logical, but breaking down the costs, you can absolutely see why, especially when you start doing this on a more commercial basis rather than as a homeowner. 5 years gives us that chance, but isn't that long that obviously we can't see an end. If, you know, Elon Musk comes out with something tomorrow that everyone switches vehicles. For context, lots of the commercial deals that we're doing under a concession, which essentially is exactly the same as this, but from the private sector to the local authority, they tend to be 15 years plus. So, or certainly above 10 years. So 5 years seems like a reasonable one. One thing we did discover, mainly through Andrew and myself talking, is if you do have solar panels, there is on your village hall and you do pay for power, there is actually a chance to make money, because we would never know, frankly, how many kilowatts came from your solar panels versus the grid. So if you can, you know, generate electricity yourself and people are using chargers at the same time, we will still count how many units we've used and pay you back at the rate you pay your utility providers. So potentially there is a little bit more profit to be made there, which is all good for the project, all good for the landowner. Why not? And it's using clean power to fuel clean vehicles. So that's really good. And probably the big takeaway is, as you'll learn through this, probably when we get to the questions, it is work in progress. This project has adapted and been tweaked quite a bit since we started, because some assumptions have changed, the project workings have changed. And if you think we're making a mistake or we could do it better, then shout. We are not too proud to admit that we could do it better. So we're learning as we go. And demand is getting quite high now, actually, which means we may have to go and source some more funds, but internally that's sort of my point of view. And yes, but ultimately it shows that there is obviously a good demand for the project. Nearly done now, but just for context, we've got one fully operational, which is Nicola from Ditton's here to talk about. We've got one operational, but the car park hasn't been reopened. That's actually on KCC land, so blame KCC here, blame myself. 4 more are coming online in the next 4 weeks, and then we've got 14 at legal agreement stage, another 12 just being surveyed, and then 16 or so that have registered but not yet applied. So I suppose on this group, most of you would fit under that. But by all means, you can jump up the queue if you can get your application in, and then we can score you highly. So we've got that. So progress is coming well. Just to give you a picture, and thank you to Nicola for providing these, because I had some kind of work in progress photos that weren't very good, frankly. This is what they tend to look like. Quite a simple thing, really. The bays will be painted and marked, and the charging units, obviously that yellow on that unit is just a bit of tape that needs to be rubbed off, but essentially it's a couple of posts with a box on top. The way connected curb operate is actually all their clever bit is under the ground, so it makes it a lot easier if they get hit by a car. And in this particular instance, we are due to go back and install some tyre stops to try and prevent that, really. But if they do get hit by a car, obviously we've insured it, but the cost to replace the unit is an awful lot less, because the post and the socket on the top are pretty low cost. All the expensive bit is beneath the ground. So it's a good piece of kit. They use recycled materials, can do a lot of stuff. It can connect into air quality sensors and all sorts if we wanted to in the future. So happy to discuss that. And then there's a photo here of or screenshot from the app, and this is what it will show up. They're quite a good supplier in terms of the interoperability. So they're doing deals all the time with Ringo, the parking app, and other suppliers. So as the end user, you've got lots of options to pay to make life easy, which is something the industry needs to do more of. And this is the highly memorable link, but we'll send it round. But essentially that leads to all the frequently asked questions, which hopefully should answer most of the detail or anything we don't get to here today. And I think that's me. But thank you.
Thank you very much. While you move to the screen, I just want to say thank you for that. There are a few take homes for me. One about it being a programme which is about climate change more than money. There were some excellent points and questions raised in the chat, which we'll come back to, those that you didn't address once we've heard from Nicola and from Chenice. And I really like the humour about the unforgettable website. And I can tell you all now, I don't remember. It had a 4 and a 6 in it somewhere, but I'm sure as long as it leads somewhere great, that's fine. And a really good example of the county council stepping in where the market isn't providing to support our communities and our rural areas. So from a rural Kent point of view, much appreciated. We're going to go now to hear from Nicola Greenaway, who's the clerk at Ditton Parish Council. Any of you involved with Calp know Ditton is a favoured place for events for them. And also from our point of view, we ran about 10 years ago a series of events on retrofitting your village hall to be more energy efficient, and one of the events was done at Ditton. So it's a place we know as a home too. So Nicola, I'm going to pass over to you and let you share your experience of what's going on where you are. Thank you.
Hello everyone. We started the process back last September when I think we had an email from Calc about electric vehicle charging points. So I took it to the council and they were all very keen. So we registered our interest, as the process on the slide showed. In October, we had an email offering us the opportunity to apply for the electric vehicle charging point, or for the funding towards it. And then in November, we were advised the application was successful. And we were invited, that if we could provide some funding towards it, that might help with our application. So the council did agree they could fund up to 2,000 if it was required to enable us to have the points. Then nothing happened until earlier this year. So about March time, I think we had a site visit and they came out and surveyed the area where you've seen with the points. They also looked at the top of our car park with a possibility of taking the supply from the road. The reason they looked at that, they said it's possible then more than 2 points could be supplied, you know, if demand required that in the future. But I think in the end they felt that the one near the centre would be preferable and easier to do, and you know that takes the supply from our electricity supply. They channeled in and it's connected to our main fuse box. It coincided actually, we were just having some major electrical works done and we had a new fuse box installed, so that worked quite well, because I don't think the old one would have supported it. And so following on from the site visit in March, we were sent the licence agreement. I took that to the council, it was approved and signed. And then beginning of April, the installation commenced, firstly with digging out the channels for the electricity cables. Then the charge points were installed. Then somebody else came back, connected it to the mains. And then the parking bays were painted. I think that was at the beginning of May. And then final checks, and they're now commissioned. So as said before, we're just waiting for the small barriers to prevent accidents and crashes. So they're all there installed. I'm not sure if I've not seen anybody use them yet, but we've got limited hirers in using our centre, obviously those that can. And yeah, overall, we've been very happy. So the installation took a while, so it's over the course of a month really, and it's a different contractor to do each piece, which obviously we didn't know that's how it happened, but that's how it worked, but no issues. The only other thing, we thought the parking bays might be blue, but they're white, and apparently that's, so they're uniform throughout wherever they're put for this particular company. The communication's been very good, and liaison with KCC and Connect to Curb, so they've kept us informed at every step of the way, so no issues there at all. So overall, we're very pleased. We've advertised it on our social media, mainly positive comments from residents. Some said, well, you know, only 2, you know, how's that going to support all of us? But 2 is better than nothing. And at the moment, as I say, there's not been a huge uptake as far as I can see. So hopefully they will be well used as the centre becomes busier and people know they're there. We do have an area of Ditton as you drive in that is all terraced houses, so they have no driveway. So those people will be able, you know, if they want an electric vehicle, will be able to come around and charge here. It's literally, you know, 2 minutes away. So we're hoping benefit as well as the people that come here to the centre. So that's it really from me.
Thank you, Nicola. I'm going to, in the spirit of the similar experiences, go on now to Chenice Howard-Sparks, who is the clerk at Chartham Parish Council. I'll link there. We last held a village halls convention in Chartham about 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. Last time I visited the hall was during Village Halls Week last year, when a colleague of ours and I did a walk between about 8 halls in a day. It's a lovely, lovely facility. Chenice, I'm going to let you come forward and tell us about where things have got to in Chartham.
Thank you. I don't have much more to add other than what Nicola's already covered, to be honest. Ours haven't been installed just yet, and works to install them are due to start in the next 2 weeks, so all exciting this end. Just before we decided to apply though, Parish Council did decide to do a sort of a brief survey monkey type survey to parishioners, which are advertised on our website and Facebook. And from that kind of helped us to decide as a parish council to proceed with getting some charging points. We had 61 respondents to our survey, of which 20% said that they own or use an electric car, which was higher than we thought as well, so that's quite surprising. 66% of respondents said they were likely to purchase an electric or hybrid car in the next 5 years, and 60% said that having charging points in the parish would make them more likely to purchase an electric vehicle. And 75% of the respondents supported having some charging points installed in the village hall car park. So we took that as a mandate to proceed with requesting a couple of charging points. Like Nicola, we did suggest that we could put some funding towards it as well to help with the application process. And obviously the fact that we'd done a survey as well did help to demonstrate we had a need for the points. I'm sure that helped with our scoring as well. We found that the process was fine. We had lots of communication from all sides on the site visit itself to decide about the supply. They decided that a new supply would be worthwhile for us. There was 2 other potential options, but Connect Curve did express some concern that it might overload the supply, especially if we decided to have more than 2 in due course. Other than that, I don't have much more to add, really.
Thank you very much. It's, for a story that's still only in its early days, that was great. And I loved a bit about the evidence collection and the co-financing as has happened in Ditton too. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Angela now, who's been going through the questions you've been putting in the chat, and Angela's going to lead the next section to pose questions you've put forward to our 3 speakers. So we'll try and finish about 1-ish, but if it overflows a little, that's fine. So Angela, the screen is yours.
Hello, hi everyone. Okay, so I've kind of summarised the questions that have come up in the chat so far, but do keep on putting them in as we go along, because Keith is monitoring the chat, so he'll be looking at other questions coming in as we go along. I think some of them we've covered, but Tim might want to say a little bit more, or Chenice or Nikki as we go along. So Tim, the first one was, is the scheme covering schools as well, or is that going to come under something separate?
Currently not, although if you've got any good ideas about how we could do it, then yes, we do actually have a different grant we can give schools, which actually weirdly on the same website that the link in my presentation is, it's on that website too. So you'll see at the very top of the website, don't know what it's called, but it should be a school grant thing. Email me or email that email if you want to find out more information. We can give a grant. We were looking at us doing exactly the same thing or extending this to procure for them, but the difficulty with it is obviously they're not usually open to the public, which makes, you know, are we aiming this at staff? Are we aiming it at parents? But you think, well, do you want parents to drive? I don't know, open to it. If anyone's got some good ideas for how we could work them in, or if you've got a site where maybe the school allows the public to use the parking at the weekends or evenings, then that really would be a good option.
Okay, brilliant. So they can, I think there's just that one query about that, and they can contact you if necessary. Okay, brilliant. So I think somebody was just asking about KCC parish council funding and how much difference that makes in terms of, I suppose, whether that gives them much higher priority if they're allowed to, you know, if they do put something into the costs.
So officially on our score, it doesn't make a difference. However, the reality is we do only have so much funding. So when scores are the same, which happens quite a lot, then obviously we will prioritise those ones that can chip in a bit of money. I imagine the next question people are going to ask is how much would make a difference. So for context, looking down my list, we have majority give around 500 to 1,000. Some have given 2,000. Some have given actually 4,000. The ones who give higher amounts, we tend to do 4 charges. So if they're bigger locations, but as I said earlier, we tend to average about £12,000 to £6,000 each to actually install the chargers, simply because, and you will get cheaper quotes. I can guarantee you'll be able to find supplies for a cheap quote with that. However, the reality is we make sure they're 7 kilowatts each. Lots of the charge points, when you're providing multiple ones, will do what they call balance the load, which means that if 2 people are using them, they might share 7 kilowatts. So they'll each get 3.5 kilowatts, which is okay, except if you don't really pay attention to that and you plug in thinking you're going to get however much charge in an hour and come back and you're a little bit disappointed. So we future-proof a little bit more, and the kit is quite robust. So it costs more for that, but we stand by the quality. I think is probably quite important for us. But yes, match funding, very much appreciated. It will help the scheme carry on. I'm just juggling funds all the time, so yes, match funding would be much appreciated, but isn't essential.
But I think I'm right in saying, Tim, that there's a whole list of criteria, and being able to put something towards it is only one part of the decision, because obviously you're looking at the whole network and the spread. So I mean, I think village halls in particular would be, you know, many will not be in a position probably to put anything or very much in. So, you know, just to reassure them that that's not going to be the only criteria by any means. Okay, so thank you for that. So we've got, this is a query about parish councils don't pay VAT. So might this reduce the cost at the charging point?
Yeah, so a good question. I'm now going to go into the depths of my brain about tax law and stuff. KCC have the same boat. I think the reality is the customer still does pay the VAT, but how it works out on your tax, essentially, I think the logistics are, and I might have to come back to you on this to confirm, but Connected Curb will essentially pay the VAT for us because they collect the money. They'll pay the VAT because the VAT still has to be paid, but anything left gets distributed without VAT included. So I might have to come and correct myself if I've just talked a load of rubbish, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. I don't think we can get away from paying the VAT. The customer can't get away from paying the VAT because on public, which is a little bit of an unfair, just as a wider going off topic. If you charge at home on your home charger, then you pay 5% VAT as you do on your electricity bills at home. But the public, the HMRC have just confirmed the other day that public charging will remain at 20% VAT, which lots of people in the industry feel is really unfair for those who can't afford, you know, or don't have a driveway. Yeah, I suppose if you were to be really picky about it, you could have somebody in a great big mansion with a range of Teslas lined up, and they're paying 5% VAT versus somebody in a you know, a flat or apartment who would have to pay 20%. So I'm pretty sure it would still have to be paid.
Thank you. And do you want to just say something, Tim, about the scope for people to subsidise it or to charge different prices?
Yeah, at this stage, probably limited scope because we were trying to have this one network approach. I mean, 25p is pretty average, to be honest. It is lower than many. Many charge even 30p, but I think for a 7 kilowatt charge, it's a bit high at the moment. 25p seems fairly common. You'll still get free charging. It is doable. Connected Curb do have, I mean, their back office software is incredible, actually. They can do anything. We can do anything. Right now, I'd feel a bit funny about the idea of, you know, inadvertently we might have one village against the next because one village offers discount for whatever. However, we're open to it. If you've got a good suggestion about why or who could use it, for example, if there's fleets or if there's a charity sector that might want to do it, I don't know. I'm open to it. We're not saying no, but at the moment, I think a flat fee seems to make more sense for us at the moment.
And did this come up for Chenice and Nikki? Was there any discussion around, you know, residence rates or something like that?
No, it wasn't something that we considered at Chartham.
Yeah, nor here. No, we didn't. I don't think we even thought about it, to be honest. So we do. I think because to start with, nobody here really knew much about electric cars or charge points, so we just thought it would be a good thing to have, and waited, you know, what comes next with prices and etc. So yeah, it didn't occur to us.
Okay, thank you. So the next question, I think this is probably more one for me than for you, Tim. So this is about, so a lot of village halls are held on trust, and the deeds are held. It's not really the landowner. Somebody said the landowner is the charity commission, but it's they're sort of held by the charity commission, the kind of deeds for the land. So they're asking about whether there's whether the charity commission are on board with this. But I think really the situation is that every village hall needs to check their governing documents and see whether there's anything that would specifically exclude them from having charge points. I don't think it's very likely. And the other thing is about, there is usually a clause about not, or at least the charity commission doesn't want you to allow commercial use to sort of exclude charitable use, because, you know, village halls are charities, and so that must take precedence. But you're allowed, so long as it's not. So I think if there was a situation where there was a a tiny car park and you gave 2 of the spaces over to charge points, then you might be breaking the Charity Commission guidance. But if you've got a larger car park, I wouldn't have thought, unless it's being very, very heavily used, I wouldn't have thought there was a conflict between it being used in the normal way and having the charge points. So that would be my reading on that. But I can run it past the Charity Commission if anybody wants reassurance on that. I do know there are other counties where village halls have got charge points installed. So there is a precedent elsewhere. So I think that covers that point. So lots of things, Tim, about, and probably Chenice as well, and Nikki, about managing it. So time limits, booking systems, and you know, how you stop people leaving the car there all night or all day, and you know, hogging the charges. So maybe our 2 parish council ladies, first of all, just to say how if you've had plans of how you're going to manage their use. So Chenice.
We've not thought too much about the enforcement side. Obviously, as parish council, don't really have enforcement powers, although we do own our car park, so we do have a limited amount of enforcement there. I think we were just going to kind of see what's going to happen first, and then make a decision on how best to manage that, depending on demand, and if it does seem to be the same type of people using it, and for sort of like I said, hogging the spaces. So I think we just need to make a decision on that, depending on what happens, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Nikki, any?
Yeah, same here, really. I mean, I know one of our councillors was quite concerned about that if we have a big event and people park there, what do we do? But I mean, at the moment, we get it. We've got, marked bays for disabled people to park in it, and it happens there. So we would normally just ask the event organiser to put an announcement out to ask the person to move their car. So, if somebody wanted to come and charge and there was an ordinary car in there, then they would be asked to move. We've got plenty of space here, so it should never be an issue, but obviously it's just people seeing it, realising it, and not being lazy, because obviously they are right at the front of the building to connect where the disabled bays are. So it could happen. It has happened, actually. We have had people parking in there since they've been installed, but obviously that before they were operational, and just as they have been. But since the tapes come off and they've been there, I haven't actually seen anybody park there. So people do seem to be mindful, and hopefully it will just be users. But again, we'll manage it as we go along.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What, Tim, anything on sort of booking apps and that kind of thing? Has KCC had any thoughts on that?
At the moment, we won't offer a booking service. The whole industry is a bit divided, I think, on this, in that it's being done in some places, like in Brighton and others, but generally the difficulty is, and the way Brighton are running it, is they charge £5 up front, and if you don't turn up for your booking, you still pay your £5. We can do it through the back office. It can be done, and I think if it needs to be done because we've got an issue at a particular location, then let's have a chat about it. But on a widespread basis, I'd like to see the charges being used by people first before. I think in some ways this would be a good problem to have. If there's so many people wanting to use the charges at once, then we could look to put more in. But right now, possibly not as big a problem as we fear it might be.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you for that. So somebody's asking, do the car parking spaces have to be dedicated, or can they be shared? I think
yeah, so we are asking they are dedicated. We simply because if you do own an EV and you want, you're worried you don't have charging at home, you're probably picking 2 or 3 places that you go regularly that you can charge, and so to provide that confidence, or to anyone who thinks that they might want to switch, they need to have confidence that those bays are available. However, if you've got a particularly limited car park, let's look at options. It may be we only put 1 charger in. I think there was a question about that. Do we always do dual head? We try to, because you might as well, because you get efficiencies on the cost. But if only 1 charger is appropriate because it's such a remote location, then okay, we'll go with that. we can look at it, but ideally, yes, reserved only for EV charge, and that's it, reserved only for EV charging. Ideally, just because you've got an EV, you shouldn't really go and park in it and then wander off unless you're using it for charging, because your neighbour who might need to charge can't access it. So tricky one. We all need to learn. I think the new culture, a new culture needs to develop around it.
Yeah, brilliant. Somebody's saying if they a village hall that has to close overnight because of security issues, they close their parking overnight, would they still be eligible, or would that really rule them out?
It would still be. We are doing a location that has the same situation. I'll be honest, it makes it a little bit less convincing for us to be able to make the case, because you're basically cutting out half or a third up to a half of the revenue earning potential. So we have to look at it that in reality, KCC is going to lose money on these sites, or the project is going to lose money, especially as with these speeds, lots of people will do overnight charging, and it provides that resource. We'll look at it. Don't be dissuaded from applying just because it shuts, and we'll have a chat. But I suppose if the costs come in really high, and it's shut overnight, it's going to be, we may have to wait for a surge of funding before we can justify allocating funds there. It is the reality, I think.
So lots of things about the power supply, and if it's not suitable, can you help out with installing one that is suitable? And I think there's one just coming about if we're planning a new village hall, and what would we, could we factor it in so that we can have them? So I don't know. I think one of you, was it Chartham that had to have a new power supply put in? So I can't remember which of you said.
Yes, it was Chartham. Yeah, we did have two other potential options, because we've got a public toilet block that we run as well, which it was close by, which could have used, or the village hall itself. But there were concerns it could overload the supply, so the supply was deemed to be more appropriate in this instance.
Yeah, okay. And was that KCC funded, or was that, or did you pay for that yourselves? The new power supply? Or was that part, that was part of the installation. Yeah. I don't know, what's been your experience, Tim, so far with power supplies? And
I went down the list this morning actually, and I used to say it was 50-50 into whether you could have it, but I think in reality about 80% of them need new power supplies. If you want to put more than a charger in, lots of the village halls or locations are, the power supply is somewhat overloaded, and sometimes there's theatrical performances that go on that use all the lighting, and they have to look at the worst case scenario. Winter's night, kettles on, electric vehicle chargers are being used. We don't really want to trip out the power, so we most of the time we're putting in new power supply, but it's not a cheap business doing it. The very cheapest we've had so far is about £2,500 from UKPN to do that. I've just received a quote for nearing £20,000 for one site, which I can tell you we can't afford to go ahead with. It just doesn't make any sense. But that's rare. They usually sit around 4,000 to 6,000, which if you add that on top of all the installation cost is how you tend to get to your £12,000-13,000 cost. However, as I said, it does future-proof us somewhat. In that if in 10 years' time and then 15 you want to move to a heat pump, well, why not use that supply? For the question, I think there was a question, did you say about will we upgrade the supply on the village hall?
Well, I think, there was one was about, can we apply now if, and because we're planning to make improvements, so, would we be able to apply later and get one? And then the other one is about somebody, they're planning village hall at the moment, so I'm assuming this is a new build, and is it a good idea to sort of approach you now and talk about putting them in so that you're kind of, they're planning it in. So I suppose in terms of getting the right electricity supply, probably would be a good idea, wouldn't it?
Yeah, getting the right electricity supply, if you can get a 3-phase supply put in, and ideally, even if you only use one of the phases, if you are, allocating the second phase to have a meter on for EV charging, that is a big win. If it's new, then they'll probably have a half decent distribution board and anyway being put in. The other bit is ducting, so basically just the plastic pipes under the ground before they lay the car park. because half the cost is in trenching and digging it all up, which doesn't look great if we do that when you've got a brand new car park. Do apply now. We have got probably 5 sites that are kind of ongoing. I'll be honest, it's actually, it seems so logical to do it at the time of being built, and it is, but it is probably twice as complicated of lining up all the contractors. And we are finding that contractors building village halls kind of think, well, this is our schedule, you know, they're having to let in a whole new contractor to come and dig stuff. But we'll have those chats, so do send it by us. And then yeah, if our supplier can just pinpoint and say, look, if you just did this and this, it would cost you hardly anything more, and you can future proof, and we can just come in and plonk the kit in later. That'd be great.
Okay, so get the power supply right, but the rest of it is, it's probably once everything's kind of ready, and even though it means digging up the car park again, or
well, so as you're heading towards it, so we have had one application, I think, which is saying we're planning to build one at the tail end of next year. I think we've got some looking at opening in March next year, and you know, they're on our radar. So I think 6 months out is probably realistic. We want to get in there once they've laid the sub base. That's when you then kind of dig up and put your trench to some extent. I mean, you could do it sooner. Sooner would be better, but the reality is, and then before the final surface goes in. But it's nuanced, I'm afraid. So it depends what the building's like, where it is. So yeah, get the application in.
Get in touch.
Yeah, you'll be on the list, and that's easier for us to deal with.
Yeah, okay, brilliant, thanks for that. Okay, so this is a quick one. Do you have to bring their own charging cables, or do you provide them?
Yeah, they are untethered, which means people bring their own. All electric vehicles tend to, well, most, I'm pretty sure they all come with one, or you can buy one for a couple of £100. It's kind of standard for slower charging. The reason we don't do tethered cables is because they tend to get damaged. They're quite expensive to replace at a few £100 each, and people just leave them around, and they can be trip hazards. So yes, they bring their own, but it's fairly standard for fast charging. When you get to ultra rapid, so 50 or rapid, or ultra rapid, and there are millions of superlatives for this, but so 50 kilowatt plus, then it's usually a DC charge, which has to be built into the unit. So it's a bit more like a petrol pump, but your slower stuff tends to be untethered if it's on the public network.
Mm-hmm. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so there's a question of why you want to put them on kind of private land or parish council land rather than on the public highway. And also a question about could a hall that only has road parking, so could they have a charger outside, but it would be on the public highway, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so if it's on the, well, I suppose if it's on the road, depends who owns the land essentially. So we are looking at one of the sites that is technically highway, but it's a car park off the highway, and I'm able to squeeze that through. Kent County Council currently has a policy that we aren't installing chargers ourselves on the highway. So under section, it's a bit complicated and boring really, but under section 115 powers, districts can do this, and we've given guidance and written guidance for them to do it. So as long as ultimately, if it gets smashed by a lorry, our ops teams can go and look up who owns that asset, give them a call, say you need to go and make it safe. But on highway charging on a widespread basis is quite difficult, expensive. Probably we need some guidance from central government. Every local authority does, as to whether they're really expecting this on a widespread basis, because I could probably walk us down most streets and explain, unfortunately it's very negative, but explain why it's not possible. Power, we don't control the parking, street clutter, lack of space, all that kind of stuff really. And do you put one outside everyone's? It's very complicated and expensive to do, and there's certainly no market for it from suppliers, so it would have to be local authority owned. To do it on a widespread basis, very expensive. You get efficiencies of putting them together, so if you've got 2 chargers in bays right next to each other, or 4 potentially, it's a lot more cost effective. Off-street charging is basically the way we're going, but it could probably be another whole series for me to just go into.
Yeah. Okay. So it's probably, so you're not ruling out the hall that's just got the on road parking, or does it depends on the situation and where it is in relation to the hall? And
Yeah, exactly that. It would really depend, but it may well be we can do some creative thinking and come up with something.
So so I think the message is get in touch with you. Okay, that's great. I think we had one about insurance. Does the KCC cover the charge point and maintenance? I think it was.
Yeah, so we are insuring the kit. So if they get, ideally they won't, but I'm sure some will get hit by a baseball bat or vandalized, or if someone backs into it, which again ideally won't happen, but we've insured that, so yeah, it's our cost.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. So Ashford, a couple of things from parishes in Ashford saying that, what is it, they're not part of the scheme. Does this mean parishes within it are excluded? I'm not quite sure. They're not. They might
be referring. Someone might need to clarify that, but they might be referring to.
Sorry, it's Councillor Walder here from Ashford. Ashford didn't participate in the bid, or is that my confusion, that they didn't take part in the bid for reasons which I cannot understand? But would that exclude parishes in Ashford from your scheme?
Okay, yeah, I understand. I think you're referring to the district charger bid.
Yes,
district, yeah. So you're right. Ashford weren't one of the 6, and no, it doesn't matter for this. If you've got your own parish land or a village hall land, and you happen to be in the district or borough of Ashford, then yeah, apply. There's no problem. Brilliant. They're just talking. That project is just their car parks, their assets.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. So got a couple more about the power supply. So I think just asking again, will KCC cover the cost of a new power supply for those which are outdated? But it's a separate power supply, isn't it, Tim, that's put in? Yeah, and KCC are covering that for the charger, aren't they?
Yeah, if we can afford it, yeah, we are.
If you can afford it, yeah. Okay. Somebody asking about the type of charger being installed. Why is it 7 kW, and is it possible to have a faster one than that?
It is possible. 7 is basically the standard. Most vehicles now tend to either charge at 7, some 11, and then they jump up to rapid charging, so DC charging, so 50 kilowatt plus. So that we are putting in a couple of 22 kilowatts on some sites. We're doing that, but I don't think long term it's going to be something we're going to keep rolling out. Ultimately, you won't be able to go much faster than 22 on most of these sites anyway. For context, to put in a 50 kilowatt charger, which is rapid, but there are a lot faster chargers. Put into a 50, UKPN liken that to putting 22 or 23 new flats on the grid. So one charge or 2 chargers, but ultimately one unit is the equivalent of building 22 flats. So it's huge amounts of power. So in these sites, they just won't be viable. It's very unlikely they would anyway, and they cost an awful lot of money to install. They also aren't funded. We do apply for the on-street residential, irony there, but the on-street residential charge point scheme for OZEV where we can, and that doesn't fund rapids. But to put context, people are installing, and some of our projects are looking at 350 kilowatt ultra rapid charging stations, which is more like charge up in 5 to 10 minutes type time. But with charging, there's a whole spectrum of charging, and the majority of charging either happens at home or close to home at basically 7 kilowatts. People plug in, go to bed, wake up, they've got a full charge, and very rarely would have to use an ultra rapid charging network. Other people will only use the ultra rapid charging network. So that's largely why we're doing it, cost and how people tend to charge.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. I think we've covered almost everything. Somebody's asking what's expected to happen at the end of the 5-year agreement period or period of the license.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, it's a good question. Ultimately, I suppose we reserve the right that we would remove the kit, which I can hand on heart say is not the intention. The whole project is the whole point of the project is to get chargers out there, and if they're being used and generating income for both parties, why on earth would we do that? However, both parties actually have the right to cancel the agreement. at any time in the 5 years with enough notice. Rather, it didn't happen. We don't want to remove it, and really, we don't want to have to remove it, especially after we've just spent, you know, if we've spent £12,000 plus, it's not the best use of money. But we could remove the kit. We could carry on maintaining it together. Ultimately, what we're saying is, let's have a chat. We won't just, if it's being well used, it'd be madness just to rip it out. It would be criminal. So we'd have a look at that. But if it's, you know, if it hasn't had a single charge in 5 years, we might have to have a frank conversation and say, well, look, it's not realistic to keep it. So yeah, we'll have a chat. But I suppose the default allows both parties to walk away. You would still get the power under the ground would still be available. So if you ever wanted to connect into it again, there's value there. And as they say in the charging, well, I don't know if it's a phrase, I think I'm just making this up, but underground power is basically where the value is. The charging point might change, it become induction charging, it might be rapid, it might be fast, but basically bringing power into a location, a good amount of power is really where the value is.
Okay, so I think maybe this is one for Chenice and Nikki, just asking about internet connection and whether that's been an issue for you, because presumably that's needed to pay, is it, or that's an option for paying for the electricity? Is that, you've got good connectivity or good mobile signal where you are, or is there an option to use the village hall Wi-Fi, or I don't know if that's an issue for you too at all?
We've got Wi-Fi here. I think people can access it from outside the building, but I think they would still need the code. But we don't appear to have people, you know, that use their facilities have issues. So, but I haven't encountered anybody with an issue with connecting to this app yet, because I'm not sure, you know, how well used it's been so far. So,
well, no, I suppose that's early days.
Yeah, it's so new. Yeah.
But you do need, Tim, you do need to have that. You need to be able to connect to the app, do you, or you can just pay with a card? Is that the other option?
So so we won't use Wi-Fi from the building, so don't worry about that. It's data, so your mobile phone data essentially. There's SIM cards built into the units, and that talks to your phone. Most people will pay on the app on your phone, but there is an RFID card option. I think they can phone to pay if they really wanted, or, which don't know how that helps with signal. There are some clever stuff going on. So actually they can also use, and I have to clarify this, they can use other, it's genius actually, I don't quite understand how it works, but they can use other cards that have a certain chip in. So it may well be like a library card or any other transaction. It's very strange. I don't understand it. I'll have to get clarification on it, but I've been told they can use lots of different options to pay because the process behind the scenes kind of ties up together. So if you've got terrible signal, apply, just tell us you're probably going to have terrible signal and we'll plan a route through. So
okay, no, that's good, because I think a lot of villages, the mobile signal is not great, and hence, you know, people are trying to, you know, use the Wi-Fi, but that's good that you don't have to use that. Great. Okay, I think we're almost, well, I've just got one last question. We're on schools again, so I'm not sure you all know about this, Tim, but it's just is the school scheme open to private schools as well as you know, state schools?
Well, this scheme isn't really open to schools at the moment, but if you've got,
I think you mentioned something else.
Schools. Yeah, I mean, it depends where the school is. If the public could use the car park at night time or at weekends, then that changes the deal slightly, I guess, because more people can use it. If it's just for staff or for parents or whatever, I treat it a bit like, even a state school, I treat it a bit like more like a business, in that they can actually apply for grants. There's a workplace charger scheme through OZEV that so if it's for staff, then you can apply for that, which I think is $3.50 per charge point.
Yeah. So but is that your sorry to interrupt, is that your department as well, or is that or who should they contact if
for the workplace charger grant is so the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles, which is part of the Department for Transport. So if you just Google workplace charger EV, something like that, it should come up. But if you get stuck, just email and I'll point you in the right direction.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Okay, I think we have actually covered everything. Just, if anybody wants to put anything in quickly, they think I've missed anything, but I think we've done pretty well actually.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. You've just taken a bit of a grilling there, but you've done it very well. Thank you, Angela, for expertly editing the questions and putting them together, and to Nikki and to Chenice for your fabulous insight there. Big takeaway for me is how rural communities are thinking about different places in which EV charging can take place, thinking about the future, what the technology looks like, thinking about the practicalities like who owns the land, will it be vandalised, etc. What do you do about people who decide to park for 3 days in a row and not leave, not take their vehicle away? The questions have been superb, I have to say. Some of the best I've seen on an event like this. We will, as promised, send you a link to the recording of the session. We'll also seek to answer any questions that haven't been answered in today's event, but I think they have, and a lot of the answers will also be on the website that Tim has pointed you to. We'd be fascinated to find out how things go at Chartham and indeed the other 46 communities which are waiting to doing something. So the 90 odd of you being here today, if you want to add to that list, that sounds great. And if we can help Tim, you to generate, to bid for more resources, even just providing evidence, that's a good thing. I think what it's left me to say is thank you for coming. Had we been in one room, we'd all give each other a big round of applause now. So go and polish your halos and feel good about today. And we look forward to welcoming you to something like this again in the near future. I'll let you go enjoy the sunshine. Thank you so much.